After being together for 7 years, Felix still calls me by his first love's name when he's drunk. Annie, please don't leave me, he pleads. I quietly agree and then take off his hearing aid, calling him by the name Howard. He always thought I was head over heels for him and willing to be a substitute. That is, until Howard, who supposedly died 7 years ago, suddenly came back. When I handed Felix the divorce papers, his eyes turned red. Did you ever love me? He asked. Of course not. Don't you have anything to say to me? I smiled softly and replied, thanks for the 5 million. Otherwise, I would have never found him. The day the news of Annie's divorce reached our country, I was with Felix at a hospital checkup. His permanently damaged hearing couldn't be fixed, and he still couldn't walk. Yet when he heard the news of the person responsible for all this returning home, his usually indifferent eyes showed a hint of joy. That night, he got drunk. Holding my hand hazily, he murmured, Annie, now that you're back, don't leave again. I obediently replied, yes, I won't leave you. But then he looked at me, his expression slowly fading, and said, you're not Annie. I paused. Felix pulled a small blanket from his wheelchair and threw it in my face. Just because you have the same face as Annie, you think you can become her? How ridiculous, Jenny. If there's nothing else, get out, he stated calmly. Though the blanket didn't hit hard, it felt like a slap across my face, shame washing over me. It brought me back to many years ago. When I was 18, the night before my art exam, Felix's first love Annie tore up all my drawings and used a gem-encrusted silver hammer to break my fingers one by one. Even after they healed, my hands would uncontrollably tremble when I picked up a brush. I could never paint again. Felix, Annie's protector, was the one who found me after. He slid a check across the table. If it's not enough, name your price. Holding my shaking hand, I resisted the urge to yell, what good is your money? She ruined my dreams, my future. Then Felix laughed, looking at me with a gaze that was both gentle and disdainful. Just take it. Isn't your so-called dream just to earn more money? Back then, he was cold and aloof. At 23, he was the youngest head of the Smiths. He looked down on me so much. Neither of us, nor anyone else at the Smiths, would have thought that Felix and I would be married in 2 years. On my 20th birthday, it was also Howard's 4th year in the police. He disappeared while rescuing hostages from pirates at sea. The government searched those waters for a month but never found him. Everyone said Howard was gone. For months, I was out of it, my spirit on the verge of collapse. Then, in the corner of a blurry photo on a secret foreign website, I found him. It was a hunch, a feeling in my bones, that was Howard. But finding him from that picture was like hunting for a needle in a haystack. I needed a lot of money. That's when Annie left Felix, who was injured for her, to marry abroad. When Felix recovered, he found me. Annie came back late one night, 7 days later. Felix had a car waiting for her at the airport all day, bringing her home. She wasn't the triumphant figure she'd been when she left. Dressed in a simple white dress, she looked stubborn and said, June, you remembered me after all. Her eyes shifted to me in the corner, a sudden shock overtaking her. Moments later, she almost shrieked, Jenny, you cheap knockoff, what are you doing here? I stayed silent, watching her. Felix simply stated, she is my wife now. Annie, in disbelief, questioned with tears in her eyes, what is the meaning of this? You said you would wait for me forever, and now this? Someone like her? Standing her ground, tears fell slowly down her face. Her face, so similar to mine, bore a fragile beauty. Push me over, Felix directed, after tilting his head toward me. Wheeling him closer to Annie, Felix took her hand and sighed, Annie, you've been gone so long, of course I'd miss you. She's just a cheap stand-in, don't worry. It was just a stand-in. Annie picked up a cup of steaming water on the table and splashed it straight at me. Now that I'm back, can I show my disgust at this imitation too? Felix never took his eyes off her, accommodating her. Of course you can. The hot liquid dripped down, soaking my clothes, leaving a painful heat on my skin. The pain nearly buckled me, tears flowing instantly from the burn. Why are you crying? Acting pitiful again? Annie said with disgust. You make me sick. Felix finally looked at me, regarding my scalded face with a slight frown. Calmly, he said, get out, Jenny. The next morning, Felix sent 500,000 to my account. No notes, no explanation, but I knew. This was his way of compensating for Annie's actions. I wasn't as naive or stubborn as I was at 18, dreaming of justice. I accepted it calmly and even thanked him. After I healed, Felix looked at me and suddenly laughed. I thought your pride would last forever, Jenny. Lowering my gaze meekly, I replied, Mr. Felix, people change. Tonight, there was a banquet. It was specially prepared by Felix for Annie. After she married someone abroad, Annie's family started to decline back home, and Felix had to use his connections to open doors for Annie. During the gathering, Annie's old nemesis, Ray, suddenly stood up holding a glass. Annie, weren't you off being a princess with some royal family? Why are you back here like some stray dog with your tail between your legs? Annie's face instantly turned pale. Ray called for a bottle of strong liquor and pushed it in front of her. I know what Felix is up to tonight. Tell you what, Annie, if you down this bottle, we're square. Who knows, maybe I'll even help you succeed here. Annie's eyes welled with tears. She looked at Felix, her voice trembling. This is strong liquor. I could die if I drink it. Hey June, didn't you say you'd always protect me? Felix comfortingly held her hand and looked at Ray. Annie was quite stubborn in the past, so it's only normal you got upset. How about someone else drinks it for her and apologizes? He paused and looked at me. Jenny, go drink it and then apologize to Ray. Ray leaned lazily against his chair, smirking as he said, I don't mind if your wife agrees. I still had wounds that hadn't healed completely, and the doctor had strictly advised against drinking alcohol. Sitting frozen, I clutched my trembling wrist, silently locking eyes with Felix. He spoke calmly. I'll have my assistant wire you 100,000 later. There was a moment of heavy silence. I stood up, grabbed the bottle, and tipped it back. The burning sensation seared from my throat all the way to my limbs. The strong fumes rushed upward, making my eyes water. Ray's group clapped and jeered. Impressive, what a woman of strength. Felix's wife sure loves money. What, was she poverty-stricken in a past life? Their tone was filled with sarcasm. When I finished, I set the bottle down and bowed deeply to Ray. Ray, I'm sorry for past offenses. Ray toyed with his glass, chuckling. 100,000, Felix sure spends big. All right, Annie, we're all clear now. Outside the banquet hall in the restroom, the dim lights carried a faint scent. Clinging to the toilet, I threw up violently. My stomach and throat were so numb with pain that it wasn't until I saw streaks of blood in the vomit that I realized how bad it was. I forced my aching body to call for an ambulance. It wasn't until I was hooked up to N4 that I got a call from Felix. Where are you? Lost your way doing shots? Or are you throwing a tantrum with me? He sounded mildly annoyed. I quietly said, getting 4 fluids at the hospital. He laughed. Living with me for these years has made you soft. I didn't reply, just stared up at the swaying fluorescent light above. Maybe it was too harsh, causing my eyes to well with tears. I'll have a driver pick you up from the hospital later. No one else takes care of you better. With that, Felix hung up. Back then, he injured his leg and ear saving Annie. Annie left him and went abroad, and I married into Felix's family in her place. Because of Felix's disability, we didn't even have a physical relationship. As a titular wife, I was more like a personal caregiver. By the time I got home that night, Annie was already asleep. Felix waited for me in the study. Having had some drinks, he looked at me through a hazy gaze. The money's been wired to your account. Jenny, don't hold it against me. Annie has never faced hardships. She's different from you. I sniffled and softly replied, I understand. Mr. Felix, I'd like to see an art exhibition abroad next month. Is that okay? Felix chuckled. Of course it is. Jenny, see, your so-called dream isn't worth that much, right? I said, yes. Perhaps drunk, he slumped against the wheelchair and closed his eyes, exhausted. Looking at the face partially resembling a person from my memories, I reached out and removed his hearing aid, speaking hoarsely. Howard, just saying that one word made tears uncontrollably fall. It's been 7 years now. Please, let me find you next month, okay? Maybe it was because I was about to look for him. That night, I dreamt of Howard again. We grew up in the same orphanage. He was always brave and had a strong sense of justice. Later, he became a SWAT officer. I wanted to study art and take the entrance exams, so he sent me his earnings. Go to better art classes and don't skimp on materials. He'd visit me at school, pat my head, and slip me money. But he couldn't handle Annie. After I was better, he returned to the unit. Before he left, he hugged me and promised, one day, I'll make Annie face justice. Believe me, Jenny. With tears, I nodded hard. I've always believed in him. I just haven't found him. With Felix's relentless help, Annie seamlessly re-engaged into the social circle within 2 weeks of returning. The night before my flight out, I dropped them off at a business meeting and planned to head back. The flight was early the next morning. I quietly told Felix, Mr. Felix, I'm going to head back and rest now. He nodded, appearing indifferent. But Annie suddenly spoke up. Stop right there. Holding a glass of red wine, she slightly tilted her head and looked at me. Heard you're off to an art exhibition abroad? Your hands messed up to even hold a brush. Jenny, what kind of artist are you dreaming to be? I ignored her and headed for the door. She tossed her wine at my back, staining my clothes. Did I say you could leave? Annie's voice dropped as she ordered, get back here and help me with drinks tonight. After all, people like you are born to serve. I stood there, frozen. Felix sighed lightly, resigned yet indulgent. Listen to Annie, Jenny. Or I'll have no choice but to cancel your ticket tomorrow. At that moment, I suddenly thought of Howard again. Back in the studio, Annie publicly humiliated me for the first time. She pinched her nose and said loudly from several meters away, it stinks. How could someone like you even have the nerve to be in the same room with us? That night, I called Howard. Is there really a higher and lower class of people? I asked. He was on a mission, driving with the window down. The wind from the open fields whistled through the phone. Howard's voice was a bit obscured, but it carried a thunderous strength. Jenny, everyone is born equal. No matter where or how you grow up, the same moon shines on us. Under Felix's influence, no one mentioned Annie's messy divorce. Instead, everyone praised her. Word was Annie was a famous painter abroad, sought after by even royal families. Her work sold for fortunes. Annie modestly smiled. You're too kind. I just have a knack for painting. She was allergic to alcohol, so I drank in her stead. That night, I visited the bathroom several times to throw up. Spots of rash covered my neck. As I returned, I overheard a conversation. The woman with Annie, is she Felix's wife? They look so alike. What wife? She's just a maid. Sold herself to be a stand-in for money. Shameless. They laughed with contempt in their eyes. Cold sweat ran down my back. I leaned against the wall, gasping. I checked my phone. Felix had sent another $1 million. I had Moonlight on the Prairie exhibited at the art show. Don't blame Annie. She's not in a great headspace. I know. She's organizing a new show. Someone offered a high price for another painting like Moonlight on the Prairie, but Annie didn't paint it. It was a product of a sleepless night just after I got off the phone with Howard at 17. I ended up selling it for $20,000 to raise money. After marrying Felix, I learned he was the anonymous buyer. The prairie wind had shape, and the moonlight cast evenly on all land. Something Annie could never capture with her elitist outlook. In the 7th year, I finally found the photographer who captured a certain photo. Do you know where he is now? He shook his head. Seeing my disappointment, he hesitated, then whispered, actually, I caught him on camera again 6 months ago. I froze. But where I take these photos is dangerous. If I reveal it to you, I'll have to leave immediately and go overseas. Pay up if you want the info. I was $2 million short. Returning home, I approached Felix. Before I could say anything, Annie laughed beside him. You have the audacity to think you're worth so much money? I ignored her and locked eyes with Felix. Mr. Felix, name your price. He met my desperate gaze, surprised, but said, Jenny, Annie's been upset lately. I need to cheer her up. It's her call. Annie looked at me, smiling slowly. Jenny, isn't your talent supposed to be superior? Aren't we the ones you despise the most? Want money that badly? Then kneel and beg. I knelt before her, my lips bloodied. Annie burst into laughter. You actually believed it? How stupid. She sneered. I lied. When I broke your hand, didn't your brother also beg my uncle to bring me to justice? Little did he know, I was watching the whole thing next door. Just like him, you're too naive. An idiot from the lower class. Heard he's dead. Such a pity. She leaned down, her poisonous smile as alluring as a deadly flower. Something snapped inside me. When I regained my senses, I had her by the hair, forcing her against the table, biting into her shoulder as if I could tear flesh away. Annie, unused to suffering, cried out in pain. But she, living in luxury, couldn't match my strength. Jenny, have you lost it? She struggled and screamed. You crazy bitch. Finally, Felix called the servants. In a cold voice, he said, Jenny, after 7 years in this house, you still don't grasp decorum. It's my fault for treating you too well, making you forget your place. They forcibly pulled me away, my mouth filled with blood. Annie nearly lost her mind, slapped me twice, and ordered others to throw me into the bathroom. The tub was full of cold water. My face was shoved into it, water flooding into my nose and eyes, causing pain so intense I shook and convulsed. Near suffocation, someone yanked my hair back, dunking me again. In my last seconds of consciousness, I thought of Howard. When he fell into the ocean, did he feel the same despair? Did he think of me? Annie went too far. In the end, I was rushed to the hospital. It took a major illness to recover. As compensation, Felix sent $3 million. More than you asked for, so drop it, Jenny, he told me. Ignoring him, I tried to buy the photo, but the money was returned. The photographer's account was closed. I sat in the hospital, the sunlight like liquid gold through the window, yet I felt no warmth. I don't know how long passed before someone knocked at my door. A stern-looking middle-aged man stood there. Upon release, he took me to an unremarkable building. It's dangerous. Stop searching for Howard. He's out of reach, too, he warned. He's not dead, right? I asked. He wasn't before. Now, I'm not so sure. His mission was dangerous. We lost contact with him a week ago. Tears welled up in my eyes. I trembled as I spoke. Why didn't he let you tell me? Howard knew you got married, and to that Felix guy. He said he didn't want to disturb you, just let you think he died 7 years ago. As I left that small building, night was falling. I looked at the dimming western sky, feeling like fate had played a huge joke on me. When I got back, Felix was sitting in a wheelchair, waiting in the villa's yard. When he saw me, he asked in a deep voice, where did you go from the hospital, Jenny? Are you mad at me? I looked at his proud face, secretly displeased. It barely resembled Howard's face, sharp from surviving countless dangers, but just enough to save me from suffocating despair. But after today, nothing seemed to matter anymore. I walked past him numbly without saying a word. He grabbed my wrist. If it's about Annie, I'll admit I was a bit biased towards her. He spoke softly as if making a huge concession. As a compensation, I'll have my assistant send you more money. Stop making a fuss. I didn't respond, just stared at the sunset in the distance, bit by bit, disappearing behind the mountains. When night fell, I spoke quietly, Felix, let's get a divorce. He frowned, warning me, these years, I've spoiled you too much. You've forgotten your place. Without me, who else would give someone like you so much money? I laughed, covering my face. What's the point of money? Useless? Have you forgotten how you begged me on your knees? I ignored him, leaving the divorce papers in his study and moved out of Felix's house. Time passed day by day. A month later, I got an invitation from the orphanage where I used to stay, asking me to attend their charity fundraiser. These past days, Felix initially thought I was being childish and didn't want me to push the limits. Later, he seemed to realize I was serious and started trying to win me back. "Stop messing around, Jenny. Come back and I'll have Annie apologize to you." I never replied. On the day of the fundraiser, I got on stage and immediately spotted Felix in the audience. He was staring at me intensely. The host asked, "I've heard Miss Jenny grew up in this orphanage and has donated multiple times afterward." Yes, I wanted the kids to live a bit better. This was something Howard had been doing since he graduated. After he left, it became my responsibility. As I know, Miss Jenny had an older brother here, someone doing commendable work, named Howard. Hearing Howard's name, I froze. I scanned the room and finally locked eyes with a shadowy corner. My heart pounded loudly in my chest. After a long time, I found my voice. "Not brother. He's not my brother. Howard is 6 years older than me, but I never called him brother because I liked him. He lost a lot of weight, his cheeks were slightly hollow, and his skin was full of scars. But his sharp, cold eyes softened in an instant when they met mine, as bright as stars. Now, you've found him." I almost thought I was still dreaming until Howard's warm fingertips touched my hand. His voice was raspy and slightly muffled, vastly different from 7 years ago, as if his vocal cords had been damaged. I remembered what the middle-aged man said. These 7 years, he had been on a very dangerous mission. Uncontrolled tears surged from my eyes. "I'm sorry, Jenny," he said softly, then turned to the audience. "I'm Howard. I've been at Sunshine Orphanage since I can remember. The children here aren't of noble birth, but can still contribute to the country and society. I thank everyone for their generosity." He bowed deeply. When he stood, he couldn't stop coughing, and blood stained his lips. At that moment, I realized how severe his injuries were. He hurried here to see me. After the charity fundraiser, Howard was taken to the hospital. As I was about to follow, I was stopped by Felix's assistant. She said, "Ma'am, Felix wants to see you." I corrected her with a frown. "I'm not a ma'am, I've divorced Felix." The divorce papers weren't signed, so we're still legally married. Felix's voice sounded. I looked over and saw him in the wheelchair, meeting my eyes with his usual aloof gaze, now tinged with panic. "Jenny, come back to me. What you said earlier, I can forgive." I smirked. "Who needs your forgiveness?" He came back. "I don't need your money anymore to find him. Move, I need to get to the hospital." Impatient to see Howard, my words were sharp. For a moment, a hint of absurd sadness appeared on Felix's face. He asked me, eyes reddening, "You never loved me?" "Of course not." He closed his eyes. "These 7 years, you stayed by my side, willingly being Annie's substitute, bearing everything without complaint. Isn't it because you loved me? Jenny, do you have a heart? I just found it ridiculous. You treated me like a servant, let Annie torment me, and my compensation was no more than what you spend on a bag for her. I've been acting all obedient and respectful in front of you for 7 years, and it made me sick. 7 whole years. You don't even have the basic respect for me. Felix, you should be glad you're really rich, otherwise, I would have never picked you to get money from. He's really fragile." Just a few words, and his tears were about to fall. I left Felix and turned to leave. This time, his assistant didn't try to stop me. When I got to the hospital room, Howard was already on an 4 drip. His body was covered with wounds, some of them even festering. "I escaped by boat," Howard whispered to me. "After I got the most crucial evidence, they found out about me and chased me all the way. They didn't want me to bring anything back to the country. I couldn't use my SIM card or internet, otherwise, they'd GPS and find me. I had to rely on an old memory from 7 years ago to find the port." Just a few words, but they were terrifying enough. My heart felt like it was in a vice, and I managed to squeeze out a question. "So now what? Being at a public fundraising event like this, isn't it dangerous?" "Of course not." Howard hesitated for a second and gently took my hand. "I'm back now. It's safe." I bit my lip, nodded, and couldn't take my eyes off him. I had missed him for so long, so long. With my gaze fixed on him, he suddenly pulled me into a tight hug. "It must have been hard, Jenny. I'm sorry for these 7 years." His voice used to sound so nice, clear and pleasant, with a hint of richness when lowered, like a fine cello, but now, it was rough and hoarse. I asked, "Why is your voice like this?" His arms froze slightly around me. I said, "Howard, stop hiding things from me." He paused for a moment and said softly, 5 years ago, after they used me for drug tests, it became like this. A long, long time ago, a former headmaster at the orphanage lured me into a small room with a piece of candy. Howard climbed over the wall and brought the police. During that time, I often stared blankly at the sky, expressionless. Howard stayed by my side, singing softly in my ear. The doctor said I was traumatized and suggested trying something to rekindle my interest in the world. My first set of art supplies was something Howard got by polishing shoes for people. My first painting was of Howard and me under the big banyan tree at the orphanage. He's a part of my life, an inseparable existence. For these 7 years, I haven't stopped thinking about you. My face pressed against his shoulder, and I cried with all my heart. "Please don't leave me anymore. I thought after you married him, you'd be happy." Howard said, "It's my fault, Jenny. I shouldn't have let you worry like this. But we can't be together. I suddenly looked up, staring at him blankly. I've only ever thought of you as my little sister. He was stroking my hair gently, like so many years ago, but the words came out cruelly. Even though I have my biases against that guy, you've been married to him for 7 years. If he's been good to you, don't lie to me. I interrupted him. I know you better than you think, Howard. When you lie, your ears turn red from nerves, and you can't look me in the eye. Howard suddenly stopped. He looked at me quietly, his eyes, which should have been sharp, were like a calm, gentle lake, filled with sadness. He was always the brave and righteous person in my eyes. He said, those drugs didn't just ruin my vocal cords. Jenny, I was exposed to radium without any protection. Many years ago, I read a book called The Radium Girls. In the early 20th century, those watch-dial painters who were exposed to radium, even 100 years after their deaths, the soil containing their bones still glows with a ghostly blue light. That's the deadly glow brought by the radioactive element radium. Why did Howard end up exposed to it? About half a month later, I finally got the answers. 7 years ago, when he went to rescue hostages from pirates, he fell into international waters. But he was lucky to be saved ashore and happened to learn a secret. Many people who've gone missing quietly over the years are linked to a top-secret international human drug testing lab. He contacted his superiors back home, and after negotiations, they decided to have him stay there as an undercover agent. Because the matter was so significant, the mission was eventually classified at the highest level of secrecy, and no one was told. I was there, watching as our nation's citizens were lured by promises of high-paying jobs, only to happily become guinea pigs for their experiments. The results of using those drugs on humans, the consequences, ordinary people can't even imagine. Howard gritted his teeth, the agony in his eyes. There were countless times I wanted to pull my gun and kill them, but I couldn't. All these years, he was the only one who managed to infiltrate the lab successfully. He paid the price of being exposed to nuclear radiation, just to bring those devils to justice. The turbulent months that followed were beyond what someone ordinary like me could comprehend. With the confidentiality agreement in place, even Howard couldn't know everything. I only saw the news while staying with him during treatments at the hospital. It was reported that thanks to years of relentless work, our police had gathered critical evidence. Several large groups secretly working with foreign labs were busted. Numerous powerful accomplices were arrested, and hundreds of citizens who'd gone missing over the years were rescued. Some had been tortured to the point of no return by the drugs. Others had already found eternal rest in foreign lands. I'm luckier than them. Missions like this are usually a case of 9 out of 10 are dead. Howard spat out a mouthful of blood, wiped it off with calm indifference, and looked at me. If I had died there, as long as the evidence and list made it back home, I wouldn't have had any regrets. Except for you. Because info always leaks out, they end up suspecting me every now and then. To prove my loyalty, I offered to test drugs. When I encountered radium, my body felt nothing, but I suddenly thought of you. In my memory, Howard wasn't much of a talker. Yet, during the time with him in the hospital, he'd talk a lot, like he was trying to make up for the past 7 years. The day Howard got discharged, I was stopped in the hospital's small garden. Felix was there in his wheelchair, looking a bit cold. I've let you go for too long. It's time to go back home. I frowned. We are divorced. I didn't sign the divorce papers. He put on that annoying fake gentle mask again. There's a business dinner tonight. As my wife, you need to come with me. Everyone's eager to meet my wife. Have Annie go with you. Felix softened his tone. I know you've always been jealous of Annie, but now, her gallery business doesn't need my help. She promised she wouldn't trouble you anymore. I didn't want to argue, so I turned and left. Jenny, even if I saw you as Annie's stand-in, didn't you see me as Howard's stand-in? I spun around suddenly. In the blood-red sunset, his expression looked slightly fragile. I took a deep breath. Felix, could you stop flattering yourself? You don't deserve to be mentioned alongside him. After I said those words, I noticed Felix was staring coldly behind me. So, I turned around and saw Howard, swapping his hospital gown for a crisp suit, with all those unhealed wounds hidden. His face lacked color, lips were pale, yet his eyes were steely sharp. Though skinny, he looked like a drawn sword. The warm sunset ended at his side, totally different from his cutting, cool aura. It set him worlds apart from the always arrogant Felix. I was right. Felix couldn't be compared to him at all. Mr. Felix. Howard walked over, grabbed my hand, and looked down at Felix in the wheelchair. I may not be as rich or powerful as you, but I do know a couple of lawyers. The invite was from Luke. He says there might be something there I need to check out. On the way, Howard told me. I paused, a bit anxious. Will it be dangerous? No, just checking something. He smiled, ruffling my hair. Don't think too much. I'm out of the hospital, and it'll be nice to give you a breather. The ballroom was grand. In those past 7 years, I accompanied Felix to places like this countless times. Met all sorts of people. Still felt empty. But holding Howard's hand, I felt genuine joy. There were industry bigwigs everywhere. Howard introduced me to some people he knew. That's when I learned. Among the hostages Howard saved from the pirates were some rich kids on a yacht party. Their families were really grateful to Howard. After greetings, we turned and bumped into Ray and his entourage. He whistled at me. Isn't this the wife of that female hero, Felix? Heard you're getting divorced. Still need money. Drink another bottle, and I'll give you $1 million to pay for your lawyer. His laughter stopped halfway, like a chicken with its neck wrung, cause Howard picked up a table knife and pointed it at his neck, all casual. Ray's eyes were shocked, angry. You know who I am? Do you know who I am? After Howard's question, Ray hesitated, unsure. I don't know whose son you are, say it. Nah. Howard smiled slightly, a dying man wanting company before the end? That's kinda normal, right? Guys like Ray, so cosset. Fear nobody, except those who don't care about life or death. He left with his crew, looking defeated. I stared at Howard. Don't say stuff about dying again. The doctor said your health's actually improving, some wounds even starting to heal. He sighed faintly, my bad. Sorry, Jenny. Since he came back, he's apologized 1,000 times. But he couldn't change fate. I sniffled, looking down. I just want you to be happy while you're still alive. Howard promised me. As he went to get me some cake, he disappeared among the crowd. Scanning everywhere, a wave of anxiety hit me. I wanted to find Howard, but Felix showed up, like a ghost. He looked at me, Jenny, if I apologize for the past and make it up to you, would you come back to me? No. Felix's eyes trembled, with pain showing in them. Jenny, I'm regretting it. I never wanted to admit it, but when I bought that piece, Moonlight on the Wilderness, I already liked you. I interrupted, tired of it, but Moonlight on the Wilderness wasn't painted for you. You don't even deserve its meaning. On our 5th wedding anniversary, late one night, Felix, drunk, grabbed my hand, half bent because of an old injury from Annie. He sighed, these hands won't paint again, what a pity. I withdrew my hand, covering it with a sleeve. I'm just unlucky. Felix, you can look at Annie's recent paintings, they're quite nice. He chuckled, you're right. He ruined my future, brushed it off like it was nothing. Now, he's here, pouring out his cheap feelings to me. But I really love you, Jenny. It's just, I grew up with Annie, and I always habitually saw her as. I didn't listen to the rest of his heartfelt confession, because Howard finally walked in from the hallway outside, coming toward me. I picked up my skirt and hurried to him. I didn't look back at Felix. So, I didn't see his gaze, tinged with malice, behind me. On the way back, I asked Howard, did you find what you were looking for? He nodded, apologetically. Sorry, Jenny. I came to keep you company, but ended up ruining your mood at the party. I'm not really in the mood at places like that anyway. I hooked my finger with Howard's and whispered, Howard, don't think your return would ruin anything. That's not the life I wanted anyway. Bright lights, extravagance, and indulgence. I've been in that world for 7 years, and never once felt like I belonged. I always thought of Howard and the moon from when I was 17. I've always belonged in the world where he is. You don't have to feel sorry. This top secret mission is so vast, there can't be any mistakes. You're not telling me is the right thing to do. If it fails, I could never live it down. As for marrying Felix, that was my choice, my consequence. It has nothing to do with you. I paused and softly said, I've grown up now. I'm not that kid who broke the director's vase and ran to you for help. Not that 18-year-old who broke a finger and cried in your arms. Back then, we were so powerless against the class that Felix and Annie represented. But that's all in the past. Howard chuckled. At the fundraiser, you said you only called my name. Don't know who used to call me a brother and chase after me as a kid. I blinked. Now isn't like then. Now I've got other intentions with you. But if you really want me to call you that at some point, I guess I can. I stopped, turned, and stood on my toes. Holding his face, I kissed him. I'm gonna kiss you. The moonlight that night was so gentle. The night breeze rustled the leaves. Howard didn't push me away. His body tensed for a moment, but when I bit his lip in dissatisfaction, he finally held my waist, taking control. He never wore cologne, just the scent of laundry detergent mixed with a faint hint of blood. I remembered he was hurt and murmured, don't press on your wound. It's okay. Howard held me tighter instead. A bit of pain is good. In a way, Howard and I are the same. Always using pain to confirm we're still living in this world without each other. The long kiss ended amid our breaths. Our shadows on the dark asphalt road merged into one. Just like years ago, when I ran away from the orphanage and got lost halfway, walking the night road closely with him. Actually, I went to see a doctor last month. He said my hand can't be fully healed, but after some treatment, I can kind of hold a brush again. I said I have so many ideas, so many things I want to paint and show you. So as long as we're alive, every day of our future is worth looking forward to. That night, I genuinely believed Howard and I had a future together. But fate is always fickle. A month later, someone else went missing, and everything pointed out the situation was similar to the hundreds of disappearances before. We were wrong, that case hadn't ended back then. Howard's face was serious, standing in the sunlight from the window, turning his head to look at me. Jenny, that night at the party, I was there on a mission, and indeed saw someone who should never have appeared. I felt an ominous feeling creeping up. What do you mean, someone who shouldn't be there? Howard looked deeply into my eyes. After a long pause, he softly said, he was supposed to be executed 2 months ago. Howard started leaving early and returning late on missions again, and I began trying to pick up a paintbrush again. After not painting for so long, I was a bit rusty. My shaky hand made some wobbly lines at first, but gradually, I got back into the groove. Wilderness Moonlight was bought by Felix. I wanted to paint it again, that moon and wind from when I was 17. Just didn't finish before Howard's mission had a major breakthrough. He didn't tell me the specifics, but with a fierce look, he handed me a photo. "We infiltrated for 7 years, yet haven't fully dismantled this human trafficking route," he said. Or when this part was destroyed, another part popped up. "In this world, there are always places light can't reach. When one darkness is removed, another fills its place." But I never thought. The person in that photo was Annie. It's been a long time since I last saw her. Only occasionally heard news about her. They say her art show has gone abroad. She opened a gallery there, and it's wildly successful. In just over half a year, she's had a meteoric rise. Become a celebrated genius female painter. But selling paintings was just a front. She used it to break into those crucial networks abroad. Howard was getting busier. The deeper he dug, the more startling the truths he uncovered. But the high-intensity work was taking a toll on his health. His cells and metabolism, damaged by radioactive elements, were deteriorating at a rate much faster than normal. Not just Annie, but her entire family and the Smiths. As he spat out those last 2 words, his voice carried a chilling edge. The Smiths' boss started into these crimes half a year ago. When Annie came back, he used her networking to connect with the mysterious group she'd met overseas. At that point, Howard's voice suddenly stopped. He turned his head and started coughing violently. The smell of blood slowly filled the room. The moment it hit my nose, it dragged my heart up to a never-ending high tower. He casually wiped the blood off his lips and continued, "We've got some evidence now. We just need to catch them next time they meet, then we'll have them all at once." It was pouring outside. Thick clouds covered the sky completely. After a long while, a faint golden light shakily drifted down through a break in the clouds. I still remember it was just another ordinary morning. Before Howard left, I pestered him relentlessly until he gave me a kiss. After living together for so long, this was all there was between us. He said, "Until everything is settled and I can be sure I can make you happy, I won't touch you, Jenny." I was unhappy then and made a couple of snide remarks. The little temper I had was all thanks to him spoiling me. Howard just looked at me with helpless indulgence. That's why, when a black business cart suddenly stopped on the side of the road and someone dragged me in, I didn't even have time to react before I passed out from the strong smell of ether. When I woke up, I saw Felix. "See, your precious Howard isn't much better than me. To save a few strangers being shipped out, he gave up on you. Gave up on keeping you safe. If he'd stayed with you every second, how could my people have taken you?" In an instant, a lot of things became clear to me. When Annie had just returned to the country, her reputation wasn't exactly great. Plus, she had left Felix, who got hurt for her, to marry someone overseas. Someone like Felix, always in a high position, wouldn't be helping her after being abandoned for 7 years, unless it was for bigger, long-term benefits. After it all clicked, I laughed softly. That's why you'll never be like Howard. Justice and courage are the very fibers of his being. It's those traits of his that I've always liked. Felix's expression turned completely cold. That night, Annie came. From their argument, I learned that Howard and his team had set a trap. After tightly guarding all docks and airports for a while, they purposely loosened control. Felix's men rushed to transfer their goods to a ship, falling right into the trap. I didn't think they'd make such a bold move this time. "Looks like they're determined to wipe us out completely," Annie fumed, her usually pretty face twisted with rage. "A group of lowlifes who can't create any value alive. Being used for drug testing is their honor." Her gaze turned and fell on me, freezing suddenly. "Why did you bring her here? Don't you know those people are searching the whole city for her?" Felix replied blandly, "I want to take her with me." Annie looked at him, incredulous. "Are you crazy, Felix? She's a knockoff. Do you have any idea how much harder it will be to escape with her?" Felix remained unchanged. "I like her, so I'm taking her with me." In the days that followed, I was kept in a secret villa by Felix. The release of the hostages was bound to lead back to these two masterminds sooner or later, so they began to plan their escape. Most of Howard's assets were already transferred overseas. That night, Felix, having had a bit to drink, rolled his wheelchair to me and looked at me with drunk, hazy eyes. "The divorce isn't finalized yet. We're still married. Just wait quietly. Once we're abroad, we'll start over. You've been with me for 7 years through thick and thin. I won't treat you the same way again. I'll make up for all my past mistakes in the rest of my life." He rarely spoke so much about the future, but all along, I just looked at him coldly. I'm not sure if it was because I was provoked, but Felix suddenly brought up Howard. "That Howard has been looking for you, but he doesn't have the direct evidence to prove I took you. Plus, he's afraid if he pushes too hard, I'll destroy the evidence he's been wanting." I bit my tongue, forcing my brain to stay sharp, and asked the first question that night. "What evidence?" Felix looked at me and smiled faintly. "A list, a ledger. But no matter what, he'll never get it. Tonight, I'll allow you to shed a tear for Howard, a man as good as dead." Over the next few days, Felix and Annie busied themselves preparing to flee the country. Locked in a narrow, windowless room, I pondered how to grab that list and ledger Felix mentioned. Felix was always so full of himself, he wouldn't have bothered lying to me. The evidence must be crucial. I started creating opportunities in this room. After running a high fever for 2 straight days, Felix brought in a trusted private doctor to give me N4 and moved me to a bedroom. When the fever wouldn't break, I felt a hand gently brushing my hair. "Jenny, getting sick won't work. I won't let you go," Felix said. I opened my eyes, lashes trembling, my pale face flushed unnaturally. Don't stoop so low, Felix. He tugged at his lips. Compared to before when you quietly tolerated everything, I find I like you more now. With a silver spoon in your mouth, growing up without a hitch. Who wronged you? Why harm your fellow humans and do such atrocious things? Felix calmly said, doctors everywhere say my legs are incurable, but I want to walk again. They promised, as long as they do enough extreme tests on those people, they can develop foolproof medication. I opened my mouth, but before I could say anything, a car's headlights flashed quickly outside the window. Felix took a call, and his expression changed abruptly. The cops tracked us here. They'll be arriving soon. With a cold and steady demeanor, he called Annie over. Pack up. We're leaving now. There's a boat waiting at the docks. Annie screeched, the stuff in the room isn't packed yet, and those paintings. Burn them, Felix said. He said with a blank expression, don't take any painting except Wilderness Moonlight. Annie glared at me, her eyes full of hatred. When the first light of dawn crept up, they finally packed everything. Seeing me silently staring at the painting, Felix softened his tone, saying, if you like it, when we're safe, you can keep painting. I shot him a glance but stayed silent. A small flame leaped up from the villa curtains, growing fiercer by the moment. With the sky ablaze behind us, Annie shoved me into a black SUV. Just as the door was about to close, I suddenly shook her off and jumped out of the car. I barely ran a few steps before a loud gunshot echoed from behind. A bullet pierced through my shoulder. The searing explosion of pain made me break out in a cold sweat, barely able to stand. Jenny, come back. Felix glared at me through the car window, his eyes fierce. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Come back now, and I'll get you treated. We'll pretend this didn't happen. Who needs your forgiveness? Enduring the intensifying pain in my shoulder, I shot back, just have your people kill me, I'm not going with you. Annie screamed, you think I won't do it? Felix, she insisted, if you keep stalling, the ship will leave. She's just trying to buy time until that damn cop shows up. He's not damned, I said, you two are. Felix looked strangely sad as he asked, you'd rather die than come with me? Yes, I nodded without hesitation. From the very start, my left hand was clenched tightly, hidden under my dress. He hadn't noticed that I had taken what Felix was so desperate to hide and take away from the frame of Wilderness Moonlight. A tiny USB drive, about the size of a fingertip, with cold metallic edges and a gleam. It contained crucial evidence for the entire case. I couldn't turn back because behind me were Felix and Annie, planning to escape the country. There was no safe route because their armed men could kill me and find the evidence I had. There was only one path for me. All they did thrived in the shadows. They dared only flee to the dark's cover, unable to step into the sunlight. I turned and ran toward the fiery scene lighting up the sky. The second bullet hit me just as I crossed the roaring flames. Fire licked up my skirt, blistering my leg. I turned, and through the flickering firelight, I waved slightly at Felix. Silently, I said, you won't get away. Goodbye. The heat was so intense, the metal in my hand grew hotter, threatening to melt. So I opened my mouth and swallowed it. The scalding metal slid down my throat, settling in the safest part of my body. I believed Howard would arrive soon. He'd find it for sure. Acting on the intel, Howard and his partners raced over. But the entire villa was collapsing, engulfed in flames. His face was pale, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. Once the fire was extinguished, everything had burnt to ashes. A colleague hesitated before speaking. We found a body in the fire. It was like a heavy hammer hit his chest. Howard felt dizzy. The sensation of suffocation crept in, only fully registering after a while. It felt like something in his heart shattered into dust. It was a pain that almost killed him. He stumbled forward and found Jenny. She was curled up on the bathroom floor like a baby, hunched over to protect her stomach. The faint markings on the floor resembled a drawing. Knowing her for almost 20 years, Howard quickly grasped the meaning. When they removed the evidence from her body, a colleague held Howard's shoulder firmly, saying, we'll bring everyone to justice, honor her sacrifice. The USB drive had extensive information, likely Felix's backup plan. It listed people involved, detailed accounts, and fund paths. Everything was crystal clear. Felix and Annie were captured once their ship reached international waters. Faced with irrefutable evidence, their defenses crumbled. The chaos back home lasted for 2 whole months. To the unaware civilians, it seemed like a few companies shut down, and there were some new faces in the news. But Howard knew. The dark cloud that loomed for over a decade finally dissipated. Before that, he had many times wished for this outcome, willing to pay any price, even his own life. But never should it have cost Jenny's life. When he was 7, it was a rainy day. Jenny was left at the orphanage door. Howard was the one who brought her to the vice principal, leading to her adoption. She meant something extraordinary to him. The tiny bundle, as a kid, grew up to be like reeds in the light, soft yet incredibly tough. Later, he understood, during those 7 years, she bore the pain of separation, the hope that repeatedly ignited and faded away. Now, she's a hero deserving of remembrance. Howard placed a bouquet of white roses at her grave, along with the unfinished painting. She truly had a gift. Later, he bought the missing paints, puzzled over her canvas, but couldn't match her strokes. Jenny, you should have been a world-renowned artist. The The autopsy revealed 2 bullets lodged in her body. The girl who was once so afraid of pain, later endured gunshots and burning flames, swallowing scorching metal. Howard could imagine, because of those 7 years, he searched for life amid hellish tasks. Didn't she also endure the pain of life's fragility, hopes repeatedly rising and falling? Now, she is worth being remembered as a hero. He placed the flowers in front of her tombstone and ignited the painting. He breathed lightly, resting against the grave, eyes lowering. The pain inside him grew more vivid, and he began to cough up blood. The lingering radium fractured some of his bones, destroyed his blood and cell regeneration. His body was reinforced with several steel rods, but the surgical wounds refused to heal. His life should have ended long ago. Jenny, when we meet in the other world, paint for me again. Howard closed his eyes. The flames consumed the canvas, burned through the night sky, moonlight, ocean, and wind from 10 years ago.